this episode of the Naturist Living Show, Naturists with Disabilities.
This episode of the Naturist Living Show is brought to you by Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park. At Bare Oaks, we offer traditional naturist values in a modern setting. Free your body, free your mind. www.bareoaks.ca.
Welcome, dear listener, to episode 167 of the Naturist Living Show. My name is still Stéphane Deschênes. I'm the owner of Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park and the host for this show. And I do the show with a lot of help from Samantha, who really keeps things going. So before we get going, let's hear a little bit from Samantha.
Thanks, Stéphane. I know we're all eager to dive into today's topic, but I need to take a moment to thank you, all of our listeners, from the bottom of my heart. Creating the show has been a deeply personal experience, and knowing that you're all out there listening makes it feel like it's a shared one. Whether you're a longtime supporter or just discovering us, your presence means everything. And to those of you who are supporting the podcast on Patreon, me specifically, I can't say enough. Thank you so much. I want to say a special thank you to Maria, Kevin, Stephanie, COG, and Ivan. Your generosity allows me to create without compromise, without ads, and with full authenticity. You're not just helping our podcast, you're helping a purpose. Truly. So thank you so much. And now for this episode.
Thank you, Samantha. Today's topic is about naturists with disabilities, but our guest, Dave, has a very specific disability, which brings a bit of a philosophical question about naturism, specifically about the nudity aspect, because Dave is visually impaired, and the question is, does nudity even exist without sight? Because if you think about it, it's all about seeing and being seen. You can't see people naked. If somebody's naked behind a door, it's okay. That's why we have cubicles, and that's okay. If we know somebody's naked and we can't see it, it's all right. That's why we can put black bars over bits, and apparently then it's okay, even though we know they're naked behind the black bars. So, and somehow people seem to think sometimes if you see someone nude, if you see their pictures, if someone has photos of you nude, they have some power over you. And some celebrities, we've heard lots of stories about it, fight very hard to ensure that those pictures don't see the light of day or don't become public. So it's all about the visual aspect, right? So without the visual, if none of us could see, then it would also be hard to judge people on what they look like. The whole idea of body shaming is not based on what a person feels like, it's what they look like. If you can't see it, it wouldn't exist. So maybe naturism wouldn't need to exist. Maybe the whole concept of naturism is completely dependent on sight. So it's an interesting question. But the topic in general of people with disabilities is also one that we really need to consider, because naturism is about acceptance and accepting all people in all shapes and sizes and all abilities. So this is why we had this really interesting discussion, Dave and I. Why don't we get right to it?
I'm Dave Wilkinson. I am from the U.S. in Louisville, Kentucky. I've been blind since birth, and part of the reason that I'm on the podcast, I guess, is to try to encourage people with disabilities to go to naturist events, facilities, etc., because I've found it to be an extraordinarily freeing experience, not only in the obvious ways where it's just you and the world without the clothing barrier in between, but also I think the people that are there and the general attitude of openness and acceptance, I think works well with the community of people with disabilities. So that's a rather wordy introduction, but that's me.
Hmm. And because people can't see you, are you a young man, an old man?
I am in my mid 50s. Um, I've been, I guess, actively involved in, not, or semi-actively involved in naturist events, etc., for a little over about a decade. Um, so, but I'm, so I'm, one could argue that I'm hitting, the midlife crisis portion of existence, which may explain some of the endurance athletic stuff that I do or whatever, but certainly doesn't explain the naturist side of things.
Hmm. So, one of the things that's always been fascinating to me is that so much about nudity is actually about seeing things, right? It's about what you're not supposed to see, what you're not supposed to show. So, without vision, what does nudity mean?
I think I think the rest of the world is obsessed, or the general population is obsessed with what you're supposed to see or not supposed to see. When you are actually at an event with other nude people, it's almost you've seen one nude person, you've seen them all. Uh, there are other things to do. There are other things to focus your attention on, and so for me, part of that is a lot of what everyone else is interested in. The idea that it's just my body and the surrounding uh, world, whether that's the ocean, the sun, uh, the sleeping bag and the tent at night, or when you're first getting up in the morning. It's the idea of no barriers, and the idea that this is how I came into this universe, and this is how I feel most comfortable. So that, in essence, was the start of it for me. The surprising part to me, I when you have an obvious disability, as a blind person, I carry a cane, and you can tell, when I walk in a room, people are like, "All right, that's not an everyday occurrence. How did he get here? Is he okay?" Blah
Hmm.
blah blah. The questions are sort of endless from there. As an independent person, I mean, I've had jobs where I traveled the country and in some cases the world for it, and just like anyone else, my job is to show up and do what I'm being paid to do and then get out. Um, but there's a certain element of how's he going to survive? And I didn't get a lot of that at naturist events. I got a lot more of, you got here somehow. It's proof you can make it. Um, I'll give you an example of that. I I lived in New York City for a long time as an undergrad and a graduate student, and I probably crossed more streets that I didn't want to cross in Manhattan because a well-intended soul would come up and would say, "Oh, I'll get you across the street." They grab your arm and off you go. And I've got two choices at this point. I can either say, "I'm waiting for the light to change. I didn't really want to cross the street," or the more efficient means usually is to cross the street and then as they walk on, cross right back over and go about my everyday universe. What I found at events like when I was at Bear Oaks is that people asked, you know, can I take your arm? Do you want an arm? How can I help? Do you need help? Um, and that's a very liberating, very freeing experience because if I don't want help, if I want to figure something out and get lost as hell in the process, that's my business. Uh, and I have every right to be frustrated and confused and figure it out on my own. And people aren't just jumping in. And I found that to be almost as liberating and as freeing as ditching the clothes.
Interesting. We in Canada we're required to Or is it Ontario? Maybe it's just a province of Ontario. I don't know. I can't speak for sure. But certainly at Bear Oaks, our staff is required by law to get training, sensitivity training when dealing with disabled people. It's not complicated. It's like an hour or so course. And it tells you things like, don't move people in wheelchairs without talking to them, or don't. And I always
Right.
found that funny.
Or be on their same level, instead of
Yeah,
towering over them like, the grand god of the universe or something.
but it just seemed really obvious. Like, why would I try to help you cross the street without asking you? Why would I move somebody in a wheelchair without talking to them? But apparently, it's not obvious.
and and the reason it's not obvious is because, and not to get preachy or anything, but the able-bodied perception of the world is that you know better than me, and you are going to assist me in my trek through the world by doing what I want to do, whether it's what I actually want or not.
Right. Right. Of course, they mean well, but that doesn't make it any better.
And I do not want to cast aspersions. You meet wonderful people, and God knows at times I've needed all kinds of things. And I can talk about just wild situations that I was in. This is totally not related to anything, but I was a couple blocks from the Boston Marathon bombing, and I would have never gotten out of there without assistance. And I was in shock at the time, and that person did not necessarily ask, nor should they have. I was not capable of making decisions at that point. I just had two bombs rattle through my
Wow.
body. It was trying to figure out, what the hell's going on. So there are times that doesn't apply. But there's a time and a place for everything. And so I don't want to cast aspersions on this, but what struck me as interesting about because I've talked about this with some other blind friends, and part of it is like, almost like you were asking, is like, what do you get out of this? And I'm like, I'm not going there to check people out. I'm happily married, and I really don't care. I'm going there. I'm doing this because it feels good. I meet people who are awesome, and I can live my life, in my moment, and it just works out really. It goes really well, and it's very relaxing for the most part. I mean, it's nerve-wracking when you first get somewhere and you don't know where anything is, and you try to map things out and figure it out, just like it's going to be anywhere else. But I was just surprised at the general level of openness, and to some extent, I guess, curiosity, and and if someone has a question, I'm a big fan of ask. You're just going to sit there and wonder about it, and it's going to fester anyway. So go for it, But it was much more chill as far as the whole disability thing went than most places that I go.
You've been to Bear Oaks. Have you been to other naturist clubs?
I've been to a few other naturist clubs. I've been to a few in Florida. I'm trying to think if there's any outside of Florida that I've been to. And then I've been to a number of nude beaches. Now, there's an entertaining. This is a question that you didn't ask, but I always find it's really funny. You have beaches where they're clothing optional after a certain point. If you ever really want the odd question of the day, try asking someone, is this a part of the beach where I can get naked?
Right, because you can't tell, of course.
You don't know. And there
Yes.
you just figure, I'm never going to see this person again. What do I care?
So, and I'd love to, we all like to think that naturists are more accepting in general, and I think that's probably true to a certain extent, but there's still, in other podcasts we've discovered, there's still discrimination against different colors and races and things like that. Do you find that same acceptance consistently?
I have found in general, there are always exceptions to the rule, but I have found that in general, the naturist community is a very open and I'm not finding the word that I'm looking for, accepting community. I'll, I'll give you kind of an example of that. There was a gentleman here who was organizing a naturist event. He has a portion of land that's big enough that he can have people over, and you can, get naked in his yard and no one cares. And I wrote him ahead of time because I don't want to catch people off guard. And I wrote him ahead of time. It was like, I just wanted to let you know so you're not bamboozled when I show up. I'm blind. It will not be an issue. But I don't want any surprises. And he wrote back and he was like, but I'm not set up for anything like that. And so I wrote him back. I'm like, there's nothing really to set up for. I was like, let's leave it at this. You're a major Uber ride from my house. I'll get there. If it doesn't work, I'll get an Uber and I'll go home. And then it's on me. And, and then I get there and you meet each other and it's like, oh, this really isn't a big deal. End of story. But there's that initial sort of hesitation of the unknown. And that's natural. And that's why I wanted to let him know ahead of time so that he's not standing there trying to figure out, tripping over his words and trying to figure out what the hell do I do now?
And so why did you end up coming to Bear Oaks? Because you don't live anywhere near here.
I've often wondered that over the years. I was in touch with some folks in the Bay Area. I used to travel. I used to have a job where I traveled a lot, and I would have spare time. And so, if I had a spare afternoon, it was time that was on my own. And so I went to, what is it? Black's Beach? Is it Black's Beach no, not Black's Beach is in San Diego, whatever the clothing optional beach outside of, San Francisco in San Francisco is, which I'm totally blanking on at the moment.
I think isn't it Golden Gate Park? Golden.
I have no idea. Yeah. But I had written, I don't even remember why I wrote this person, but it was basically to get like directions, to get an idea of the topography, to see if how close you could get with public transit, et cetera, or if I'd be better off taking an Uber or whatever. And anyway, that ended up spawning this whole conversation where they talked about how I might be interested in Body Fest. And at that point, Body Fest was an event that happened in Canada and in California. And in choosing between the two of them at that point, it was cheaper to fly to Toronto than it was to fly out west from Louisville. And I like Canada. So, if you're flying somewhere, if you don't drive, it's all about the ease of getting from airport to airport. And so it's a little bit of a different way of looking at things. Cleveland's not that far from me, but to fly to it, I have to go through Baltimore, Maryland, which is way out of the way. So and we were talking about this recently because there was a couple things had come up where we had an option of being in Cleveland or in Minneapolis. Well, Minneapolis is a nonstop flight. It may not be closer, but that's closer for me because I'm not driving. And so Canada works that way for me. Toronto is not a bad flight. It's there's a connection. Ubers are easy to get in Toronto. They're easy to get at Bear Oaks if you need them. So it has what I need. Whereas a naturist camping area in the middle of Indiana may not have what I need because it may be brutal to get to and even worse to try to get from. Because you can get an Uber to go anywhere, but you can't get them to pick you up anywhere. So that's a long answer to the question that you were.
No, it's okay. I'm thinking as you about your traveling. Finding your way through an airport when you're fully sighted can be challenging. Trying to figure out which way. There's all these different ways to go and these obstacles and signage. How do you manage?
I'm not sure if I can adequately explain it. You do a lot of things. One, if you choose to use it, you can get personnel in the airport that will assist you from gate to gate. And
Mm-hmm.
some of the time I will do that, especially if I've got time for it. If you don't have time for it, I've already asked people if this is where I could get naked. I'm not beyond asking them, is gate 27 that way or this way, and point, and then go in the general direction and get more directions as get closer
Right.
to it. There are also services you can use where there's a service called IRA. I forget what it stands for. It's, I don't know, AIRA. It's a service where you can essentially FaceTime with someone who has like airport maps and stuff, and they can give you directions as you're moving through the airport. And I'm wearing a little headset. It looks like, and I'm using the camera on my phone, so that they can see where I'm going, and I can use that for directions. There are obvious things you can do, like if I'm trying to leave an airport, I'll temporarily just decide I'm going to follow this person and see if they actually go out of the airport. So, there are lots of little tricks and strategies, I guess, that you use that you can use over the years. And after a while, you get to where airports. I've traveled enough that, I know my home airport, and there are several other airports that I'm relatively comfortable in. As opposed to other airports, like if I can avoid DFW, I will at all cost. It's spread out all over the place, and it's very hard to get from place to place without another human being involved.
It strikes me as you were talking about the things you're using, though, that technology in the last 20, 25 years must have really improved things, because I can get turn-by-turn directions in audio from my Apple Watch
Yeah,
and stuff.
it's been a godsend, and I've been extraordinarily lucky to be working in an industry for the longest period of time that was developing equipment that was used by people who are blind or visually impaired. And so I got to be sort of on the cutting edge of that. And the advances that have been made in the last, well, I'm 56, and I remember in the mid 1970s an article in a newspaper that came out when the first reading machine was invented. And by reading machine, it scans a print page, uses optical character recognition, and then speaks the results back to you. The thing cost $35,000 US.
Wow.
And it was huge. It took up a table. And I saw one of these things years later, and the table is shaking as this thing's going along. It was about as practical as, having a pet elephant. But it was a start. And now you can download an app that'll do that for free on your iPhone.
Right. Yeah.
It's just, there are milestones in my life. I remember going into a bookstore to buy my first print book, and it was just like, I'm going to take this back to the university library, and by golly, I'm going to read this thing using this thing. And it was crazy. It was wonderful.
Yeah, and the reading, the computer, even the way it reads now is getting almost like it's a real person reading it. It's quite astounding.
It's getting closer and closer. You have, as processing power increases, and as memory and storage and all that stuff become almost a moot point, then you can have larger and larger voices, which makes them that much more real. And so, yeah, it's an amazing. I could go on forever about just some of the wild things that. And then you just start to say, oh, because you're like, back in my day, we didn't have GPS. And,
Yeah, no, I know.
And now I go everywhere with GPS.
I know. I'm just 1 year older than you, so I remember it all myself.
At Bear Oaks, I was using a little handheld GPS system, and I would map out like where your that main office is, and one of your staff showed me where my campsite was. And so I put little landmarks where the campsite was, and where some of the different fire pits and the areas for the, how to get down to the lake and stuff were. And so by the time we finished, which was marvelous of her, she could not have been better. But by the time we finished with that, which is nothing more than, for me, just being in that area and recording a verbal landmark, I had enough of a sketchy map where I at least knew if I was going in the right direction, so that if I was asking for directions, I at least had some idea that I was moderately close to what I was looking for. You'd mark the showers and the washrooms and that type of stuff. And so that made it really possible to be able to survive in an area that I hadn't been in before.
So just so I understand, because you said following somebody in the airport, do you have a little bit of vision?
That is a very good question. I can see light, and I can see if something is blocking the light. And so when I'm following someone, my wife is always reminding me that I can't see nearly as much as I think I can. She's dead on. It's the typical male thing where you're like, oh yeah, I can do that. Nothing wrong here. I'm literally following whatever it is that's blocking the light.
Okay, so you can't tell if someone is nude or clothed.
No.
So I'm still curious. So and all your life, this has been your reality,
right?
Did nudity make sense to you when you were growing up? How? Because without seeing it, does that make as much sense?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if this is what you're asking. And so this is the beauty of digital editing. You can get to the point of it after this is all said and done. I have always liked the way that my body felt moving through space when there was nothing between me and the surrounding world. And so from that perspective, nudity made sense. Nudity makes sense the first time you're with another naked person. When you're in high school or whatever, and you're discovering sex and relationships and all that kind of stuff. Nudity
from a
certainly
tactile
makes,
standpoint, of course,
from a multi-sensory perspective,
yes.
Makes all the sense in the world. At the same time, the idea of looking at other people and being interested in, I'm trying to think how to phrase what I'm saying. That what amazes me about nudity is that and this is certainly nothing profound, but if we were all naked, nobody would care.
No, absolutely.
It's the whole idea is that it's the forbidden fruit.
Right.
I don't give a damn about the forbidden fruit. It's not like I'm going to be looking at you and thinking, oh, that I might want that. I'm just going to be, I have no idea. And so it doesn't mean that I'm not interested in, what what people look like and all that kind of stuff. And, certainly when I was, I always wanted girlfriends that looked good and all that kind of good stuff. I'm as fallible as any other human being. But the idea of getting all caught up in so-and-so is naked doesn't make any sense to me.
No. See,
so
all these things
and I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, but that's...
Well, it is to a certain extent. It's interesting because, so you obviously don't judge anybody by what they look like.
I wish that was accurate, but it is not.
Well, how can you tell?
You ask, and it makes a difference.
Interesting.
I'm a fallible human being. And you want to know if I'm really attracted to someone, the first thing I'm going to do is find someone that I trust and say, all right, give me the lowdown.
Okay.
Now, if it's an everyday friend or something, probably not so much. I'm not that interested. But at least from a dating and relationship standpoint, I absolutely cared. And which sounds very vain and probably doesn't reflect super well on me, but it's the way things are.
Well, to a certain extent, though, you were reacting not to your somebody else's opinion, and to your imagination to a certain extent.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. Like one of the things that attracted me to my now wife is that she's got just marvelously thick hair. It was wonderful. And you're just like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
you know, and I whereas someone else may have been, I mean, you just like anything else, you find parts of people that you're really attracted to. I think the voice is a lot more of interest to me. There are voices that I could never imagine waking up next to. And no matter,
that makes sense.
No matter what that, and that person would just be doomed. That would be, swipe away. So,
Yeah.
So you have your own sort of set of, this is what I want, just like anyone else.
Well, one of the big concerns that men in particular, generally,
people are going to be listening to this. They're going to be like, he's as shallow as I am.
No. It's actually slightly different. It's an interesting variations. But you are a product of society like everybody else.
Yeah.
And I'm sure even if you couldn't see it, you were taught that you should not let others see your body fully nude as you were growing up.
Oh, absolutely. And I would have never, and again, I always have wanted to go to a naturist facility of some sort, and had thought about it years and for off and on over the years. And the only reason I ever went to one, and bear with me because this doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's sort of where I was at that point. I do a lot of long distance endurance athletics. And at that point in my life, I was running marathons, and I had a running guide, a gentleman named Jacob Wells, who I ran tons with. And Jacob and I were incredibly close. We were basically brothers. Jacob used to argue that we were chasing the platonic bondage world record, because we'd run with a tether.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sure how many other people are in the race for it, but in November of 2014, Jacob died in his 153rd marathon, and I was in Canada actually at the moment. The resulting term, he had run enough that he literally enlarged his heart, which ended up killing him. And Jacob was about 5 years younger than me. I was supposed to do a eulogy at a service for him, and I was traveling the week before this, and I was in Tampa, and I had a Friday that was a day off. I was supposed to work on Saturday and then be in Little Rock, Arkansas for this eulogy on Sunday. And I was just fried. I'd been traveling all over the place. I was a wreck. And I was sitting in somewhere I think in Philadelphia. And it was just like, this is the time I'm going to do this. I don't care about, I need something to I'm just kind of numb to reality at this point. And this is either something that's going to be incredibly relaxing and invigorating, or it's going to suck. And right now is the time to find out. And I Googled clothing optional places in Tampa and got a reservation. And the next day, that's where I went. And it worked out relatively well. And I wrote a lot of his eulogy sitting naked by a pool for the first time in my life. And it was just sort of wild, mixture of emotions. But when you're dealing with that sense of profound loss at that point, I'm like, I don't have time to worry about it, how people are viewing me at this point. I've got other things to worry about. So anyway, that's not what you originally asked, but that's how I originally got sort of started in all of this. So thank you, Jacob Wells.
I'm sorry though, because you obviously lost a good friend.
He was an amazing human being, and he is still with me. I am doing training for a 3,000-mile bike race next summer that goes from coast to coast in the U.S. You get 12 days to finish the thing. And I am sure as I start to hallucinate and get just more ridiculously nuts as you get exhausted, he will be saying various obscene things in my head. And we'll go from there.
Keep you going.
Oh, yeah. Because he'll make fun of me, and it'll make me mad.
So, one of the things that the textile world, men in particular, fear is that if they get used to seeing nudity all the time, they will lose their sexuality. You've never seen nudity, and any problems with sexuality?
I feel like I should go grab my wife and have one of these sort of like infomercial things where we'll spare. She seems very happy.
And you
I'm
get turned on
happy.
and everything else.
Yeah, I mean it's. I think there are reasons people use blindfolds. You don't need vision to get turned on.
No, of course you don't.
Yeah.
It is a real fear that I've heard expressed. But it's a total misunderstanding what sexuality is all about. I mean, I asked a question kind of tongue in cheek,
sure,
because naturists obviously know that you can get used to nudity and still have no problem.
We're all still breeding. We're doing fine.
Yes, exactly.
But something else that, and this is not something you asked, but it's one of the things that I think is just kind of bizarre. And if this is leading into territory you don't want to go, stop me at any point. It strikes me as really weird that in general, I do not and will not ever know what other men look like. And what I mean by that, I've been with various body types with women over the years. I will never know what an uncut penis looks like. Because it's not like you're going to walk up to someone and say, "Hey, can I
can I check it out?
Can I check this out?" And so I know a lot more about women's bodies than I do my gender, which just strikes me as really weird. And I've looked over the years for. Bought different like uncut dildos and things to see if something looked realistic, and they all seem to be this weird hard plastic thing that is just sort of, you're like, that's not what a human being looks like, and so this is not right. But it's one of my fascinations in life.
I'm intrigued how you keep saying looks like, because really what you're saying meaning is feels like. And
yeah, you're right. And everyone gets visual people, and I have to throw this in here because I like it. I for years in my jobs when I was traveling and stuff referred to visual people as sightlings because I just think it's a cute, endearing term. And so sightlings get caught up when you talk about like watching TV and looking at something. And what you really mean when you say you look at something, you may think that you're looking at it, but you're also thinking of your other senses, how it feels, how it responds. If you were only looking at it, you'd never really, it'd be very one-dimensional. A lot of the time when you're actually looking at something, you're having a multisensory experience. And so when I'm looking at something, yes, I'm talking about how it feels, scent, all of your, how it sounds, taste, smell, all of that stuff. Which is a lot of the time what you're doing as well, but you're thinking of it the world is an overwhelmingly visual place. And we think about vision first and we forget about our other senses.
Well, of course. And what's interesting as you're saying that is you are sensing and you're imagining in your mind what something, I guess, to a certain extent looks like.
Right.
without ever having seen it. So you don't really know if you're imagining it right, I
I
guess.
can create my own reality. My wife says
Yeah.
that I often do.
Hmm.
She's probably right.
No, it's interesting. I wish I could see what you are imagining. That we could share that.
I
It would be kind
know.
of interesting.
It'd be fascinating because then if we could, then I'd be able to see what you're imagining, and I'd be and I could alter accordingly.
Yeah. No, that
It'd
would
be
be.
kind of like sharing screens.
Yeah. Something else that probably means nothing to you is race, because that's totally a visual thing.
It is totally a visual thing. That being said, I grew up in the southern U.S., and if you are in the South in the U.S., you are cognizant of race. You become more. I think I was probably more cognizant of race when I left because and not to drift off into politics or whatever, but race is a huge issue in the U.S. and there are various things with voting rights, et cetera, that are where where people are being denied the vote, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I know that as a white male, that I have a certain amount of privilege that other people don't have. I
Hmm.
also know that as a blind person, that some of that privilege is taken away, and I would
Hmm.
like to think that I have some understanding of other oppressed and underrepresented groups. But I can remember in the early 1970s in rural Arkansas, where I grew up, where you had a white side of our doctor's office and a what was called at that point a colored side, and this was the early
Really?
1970s.
Hmm.
So no, race doesn't make a difference. I don't often know what race someone is, and I don't, in large part, care, except that it can be interesting because then you learn about culture and background, etc. But I think any American at this point has been affected by race, and
Hmm.
whether we like to admit it or not,
Absolutely. Yeah.
you know. And what I found fascinating, and then we can you can do when I left the southern U.S. and moved to New York. Um, I found that race was as much of an issue often, but it was much quieter. It was much more covert. Um,
Hmm.
Whereas in the South, you're just like, here it is. We don't like y'all. Um,
That's true. Yes.
so,
Well, there's some level of racism everywhere in
yeah,
the world.
yeah. So it's a very complicated answer.
Yeah. 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 So what can what could we do at Bare Oaks to make it better for you and other people with disabilities?
I would love to. I've been thinking about this. First of all, we'll get what I want, then we'll get to what the rest of the world wants because it's all about me. I
Okay.
mean, you know, I'm an American. That's the way we think. Um, what I would, what I want at either Bare Oaks or somewhere else, I've had one hell of a time finding a guide for like your 5K,
Mm.
and it's and I don't know why because I mean I can usually find guides for anything. I mean I've done Ironman triathlons and I'm riding 3,000 miles across the country and all that kind of stuff. I found guides for whatever reason. Running naked with someone doesn't seem to be top on people's priority list. Um,
It's because they don't understand what they're missing.
that's right. And and so what I hope comes and realistically, my running is terrible at this point, and I wouldn't be doing it for speed. I'm not a super fast runner.
Hmm.
I'm a big believer in longevity, and I'll outlast you, which is why endurance stuff appeals to me because I'm pokey. Um, so I am hoping to find guides for naked 5Ks or other athletic events at nudist resorts. Now, that's not the question you asked. That was the selfish, what does Dave want out of this?
Hmm. So, and people who, if somebody's listening wants to be your guide,
they can send me an email to dave@speedyturtle.net. We will, and just to throw times out there, I could probably do a 5K at this point in 23, 24 minutes, but I'm happy to go much slower. I'm much more interested in the experience. I find that and part of the reason I'm interested in this is athletes are nuts, and you find out when you're doing endurance sports, you know way too much about the people around you. You stand in these long lines so that you can poop before races, and you learn when you're standing in these lines, you just know way too much about each other.
right?
You combine that with nudity, and now you know everything. Uh, and, uh, you know, there's nothing left to figure out, and that just strikes me as fascinating.
It's very cool.
When Jacob and I ran, we ran in as little clothing as possible, no matter how cold it was, because Jacob's philosophy was, and I believe, that when you run, you sweat, your clothing gets wet, it slaps against you, it's cold, take it off. And so, I mean, we famously did a marathon in the sleet, shirtless one time, because we're like, it's just going to land on the shirts and we're going to be cold anyway. That's just more to carry with us. And, you know, and so we may as well take that to the next logical step. Or least logical step, take your pick.
Yeah, really, yes.
But Dave@speedyturtle.net.
Okay.
As for Bare Oaks, I would want to try to think about that for a bit. I will say, and I was not coached in this ahead of time. Your staff was extraordinarily helpful to me as far as figuring out, how to get a campsite with power somewhere where it would be relatively easy to, and it helped that you had a visually impaired person on staff at one point. But I found it to be very, there was a marvelous young lady who showed me where my campsite was going to be and let me record landmarks. I would love to have accessible menus where it would be like either online or in Braille or something other than, little things like that. If you
agreed,
it's probably and I should have thought more about it coming into something like this. I would be interested I don't know if I'm capable. I would want to really look at what your facilities are to answer for people with like mobility impairments. And I don't know how it'd be tough for someone in a wheelchair to get like to those rooms downstairs. I don't.
Yes.
I mean, I guess you could go around to the.
It would be impossible.
Yeah, it would be
really.
It'd be kind of brutal.
The
cabins,
building is terribly not accessible.
Yeah.
And we renovate areas and we make it accessible, but you can't get to the area that is now accessible because the hallways are narrow.
Right. Yeah. Those hallways would be kind of tough for. But you could have a fantastic camping experience or a fantastic cabin experience as a person with mobility impairment. And in my fantasy world, I would love to have, a Naked with Disabilities weekend or something somewhere sometime. Because it really is very exciting to have an atmosphere where people just, I start to say they don't care. They do care. They're interested in how you navigate the world, but they'll let you do it. And I just think it would be, I went skydiving one time with a group of 30 some odd other people who were blind or visually impaired, and it was the craziest experience. I'd done skydiving before, and because I'll do anything. But the funniest part,
have you done it naked yet?
I've not. I really want to. I really want to skydive naked, and I want to go cross country skiing naked because I'm a very good cross country skier.
Good.
And I was a competitive cross country skier at one point, but no, I'd love to go skydiving naked. That would. And I caught the episode of the Naturist Living show where you had the lady who had gone skydiving naked, and had tried to get in touch with her, and we'll try again to get in touch with her. I did write a couple just because this is Kentucky. I wrote to my local skydiving place a few miles from here. It was just like, if a bunch of us wanted to come and skydive naked at your facility, would you have a problem with that? And they weren't really wild about the idea, which I knew ahead of time, and it was just fun. It's like in the middle of red state America. But the craziest part of going skydiving with a group of people who are blind or visually impaired is getting through the waivers, because they would run around and read the next paragraph, and they'd zoom around the room and get you auto initial here and initial there. By the time you get to about the fifth paragraph, I would have jumped without a chute. It's like, this is painful.
Right.
And just make it stop. I'll sign anything. But I'm really happy with the training that you all have provided. And for that matter, when I've had accessibility issues at times with your website, you all have been very quick to respond and to get them resolved, which is greatly appreciated. So let me think about that.
Okay. Well, so let me ask a question in general without what there's owners of other naturist clubs listening. There are people who sit on boards of naturist clubs. What would you say to them?
I think there is a community of people who have buying power. I mean, if you look at people with disabilities on a global basis, I was looking at this the other day. People with disabilities and their families have approximately $8 trillion of economic of buying power behind them globally. That's people with disabilities and their families. That's a heck of a lot of money. Mm-hmm. I think that we can be actively marketed to, that we can be recruited, and we are incredibly loyal. And when we find something, I've been to Bear Oaks now several times, and it's because I had a very good experience. And because I had a good experience, I will go back. And I just booked a weekend there next summer.
Great.
So we are very loyal, in part because the whole world doesn't always work the way that we want it to work. And so if you want to tap into that buying power, and I hope you've got dollar signs dancing around in your head and you're thinking, I want that money. And the way that you can get it is to let us know that you want us there. And I think you can do that by having people with disabilities in advertising. Mm-hmm. I think you can do that by having people with disabilities like me on podcasts like this, that you can use, things like social media. If you have people with disabilities, to get the word out that they had a good experience. Individual disabilities, like there are various blindness, visual impairment groups, lists, organizations, etc. That's going to exist within the deaf and hard of hearing community, people with mobility impairments, cognitive issues, etc. And so what you do goes a long way and has a ripple effect in getting the word out to those communities.
I think also, I think people need to realize that if you're trying, everybody appreciates it, and you don't have to necessarily get it perfect.
I don't expect perfection. I can't do something perfectly. Realistically, if you expect perfection, you've got too much time on your hands. What we want is the effort. I'm more than happy to work with imperfections.
Yeah, there's a couple that are members that are hearing impaired, and at one point I realized they hadn't complained, they hadn't said anything, but I realized that our gate system is completely audio.
Yeah, it is,
and there was nothing. So we added a sign that said, if you have hearing difficulties, just there is a camera looking at you. Just point at your ears, and we will let you in, kind of thing. And they saw that sign and they were so thrilled.
Oh yeah.
I was going, well, I'm sorry. I apologize that, it took so long to even realize it, but they didn't ask for it. It just suddenly, to a certain extent, until you have a conversation with you or with others, we don't think, and I'm sorry about that, but sometimes we're not aware.
No,
No, you're not.
And and I think too much, we have a tendency to not say anything until, it's until the proverbial straw breaks the camel's back. And then you're just like, the whole world is,
Yeah.
and you can't do that. But by putting that sign up, which didn't cost all that much, you will make, from a purely economic standpoint, that sign will pay off for you. That is an investment that will reap dividends, and you will make a profit off that sign. Good. You should.
So so there's no sign I can put it for you when you come in.
No. Now there are a few things I would love to. I have the hardest time. The biggest barrier that I have at Bare Oaks is, and I don't even know what this thing is. It's that little gate thing that's like at waist high, shoulder height, whatever it is. That little bar thing that, you probably don't even know what I'm talking about. It's out in the parking lot. I don't know if it's a gate or what it is. But canes go right under it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, we have the gates on the road to keep vehicles from going past the office,
right?
Unless they're authorized.
Right.
So that's probably is a
it
gate.
Probably is a gate.
And it is waist height.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If that thing, and this would be more than a sign, but if that thing had more to it, where there was something at like ground level where a cane can hit it, where it doesn't go under it and my chest doesn't hit it, then I'm a happy camper.
Or there is actually a walkway next to it, but you need a guide. You need to follow.
That's right. And there is that walkway, which I invariably don't use because I lose it. And then I hit that gate. And so that's why I want that little thing at the bottom where, where the cane will hit it. And, I'm not getting clobbered by a piece of wood.
Interesting. Well, when you're here on I have some ideas, but I need to. It'd be easier if you were there. So,
dude, when
you come again, let's do some planning.
Let's absolutely do some planning, and I would love that, one, because it'll give me an excuse to stay a little bit longer, which would be fantastic. But and second, maybe you'll know a good place to go skydiving naked. So, again, it all comes, it's all about me.
There is a skydiving place just north of us. I don't know if they do naked skydiving, but I would imagine, I don't know. I find, at least in Canada, that most people are just open to doing things like that.
Yeah, they're
just to be different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something to tell your grandkids about one day.
Yes, exactly.
About the time you went skydiving with the naked blind guy.
Yes. Yeah, well, maybe somebody listening wants to go skydiving and take Dave. He's on his way.
Dave at speedyturtle.net.
That's right.
A shameless plug.
You may get a lot of invitations.
That's okay. That works for me.
So the question is of accessibility is a difficult one. We do training with our staff, and I wish Bare Oaks was more accessible than it is. We do our best to accommodate people. We ask them, and especially if they ask us, and people are generally very appreciative that we're trying. You really just have to try, because I think a lot of people with disabilities just feel completely ignored or feel that everything's on them and nobody wants to help them, which is horrible, really. So the building we have is old, and the hallways are too narrow, and there are steps, and we've put ramps where we could, but I can't say that even if you get up the ramp, you can easily make it through some of the hallways. And I would love to renovate it, but it would essentially mean redoing the entire building. And that's just not an affordable option at this point in the expenses. But wherever we can, we've tried to do something. We've tried to help. For example, at the gate, we have signage that says, if you are hearing impaired, because there's an intercom, please point to your ear and we will understand and let you through. Because we have cameras as well. So the little things like that can make it a lot easier for people. We have folks who are hearing impaired. We have folks in wheelchairs. We have all kinds of impairments that have come at times. And I think most of them are understanding that there's limitations to what we can do within the economics reality. There's no support from government to do some of the things we'd like to do. But it doesn't hurt when somebody says, hey, why don't we have an accessible porta potty? You know, those ones that they bring in, those little ones they put on soccer fields and things like that. And so we looked into it, and sure enough, we could rent one of those. So we did. So there's little things you can do that shows that you're trying it, you care. And I think that's what almost everybody just expects, for us to try to support each other and accept each other and do the best we can to help each other. So that's all for this episode of the Naturist Living Show. And thank you, as always, for listening. My name again is Stéphane Deschênes, and I'm your host for the podcast and the owner of Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. And I make the show with a lot of help from Samantha Graham, who you heard from at the beginning of the show. She makes our task a lot easier, or my task a lot easier, by doing a lot of the editing and working with all of the stuff and setting it all up for us. And I really appreciate it. And you can support her. It doesn't support me. It supports her on Patreon. If you donate a little bit of money every month, you will support the work that she does, because I don't make any money with the Naturist Living Show, never have. But I can't keep doing it by myself. I need to pay Samantha. She has, that's her job part of the time. So that allows her to keep going. She volunteers as well. So there's a lot of time that goes into other things that she does at the park. So if you go to patreon.com/Naturist Living Show, one word, you can sign up if you haven't already. And if you have, thank you very much. The Naturist Living Show theme music is The Day We Met by Mark Hodges. And you can find links to all of the items I mentioned in the show notes on the website, which is naturistliving.show.com. And please keep sending your comments and suggestions. We appreciate getting them. The show's email address is contact@naturistliving.show.com. And there's a couple of social media options as well, which are listed on our website. I hope you enjoy the show and that you'll join us again for the next episode of the Naturist Living Show.
This episode of the Naturist Living Show was brought to you by Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. Traditional naturist values in a modern setting. Traditional values means that naturism is more than just taking your clothes off. It is a life philosophy with physical, psychological, environmental, social, and moral benefits. Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park strives to promote those naturist values in a modern setting that provides the amenities and services that our members and visitors expect. Free your body, free your mind. Learn more at www.bearoaks.ca.
Children love roaming in buttercup fields, and these little cripples adore it. They enjoy the freedom and sunshine which is warming their twisted limbs and bringing health to their feeble bodies. Sunshine and happiness are the two chief medicines at the hospital, to which they are returning with armfuls of buttercups to show to the 300 other little cripples